I want to talk to you about worldly things which deviate our attention from our God and His will. And in these series of videos, we're going to be using topics that will stimulate defensive mechanisms in many Christians. But there's a reason for doing this. First, we need to desensitize ourselves to worldly affairs. And second, we need to learn to live a Christian life in a world in which our God intended us to live in. It all goes back to being prepared. This message will address America, the Republic. We're presently in a struggle with our fellow citizens, our brothers and sisters, and an ideology that will change America forever. The irony is those who are advocating for this change have no idea how much it will adversely change their lives. The ideological change that we're struggling with can easily take on the names that all heavy-handed authoritative centrally controlled governments have been assigned, like socialism, communism, fascism, oligarchy, totalitarianism, and others. These types of ruling systems only work as well as they ever can if they control all aspects of the state affairs, including the behaviors and thoughts of its citizens. The rights and freedoms of people don't come into consideration. For those who will be leading the state, the survival of the ideology is tantamount, more valuable than the citizenry. The value of the citizen will be based only on what they can contribute to the state. If a citizen is unable to contribute or is unwilling, then they are removed from society, like an infectious disease organism from a body. All these government systems have been tried, and all have failed to provide the citizenry anything of value. Those which persist exert total control over its citizenry. As a citizen of these states, you're either compliant with state ideologies or you're an enemy of the state. Advocates of these systems promote them because of the utopian ideal in which they believe there's a way in which all world citizens could be equal in socioeconomic status. It's a great dream. When these states fail or evolve into a heavy-handed, centralized authoritarian state, these advocates refuse to admit failure. They have stated and will state that the system just didn't go far enough, or if it wasn't for all those in opposition, it would have worked. History demonstrates that these nations and the status of their citizenry are left in ruins, financially, politically, and socially, both during their rule and after. Those in opposition are typically incarcerated or eliminated altogether. Ignorance is defined as the lack of knowledge or information, inferring accurate information and knowledge. These advocates claim to be well-informed and knowledgeable, but they aren't. The ignorance of these advocates regarding the blessing this country can bring and has brought will be among the saddest stories history will ever tell. We presently enjoy the greatest socioeconomic opportunities and the greatest freedoms of any people ever in the history of the world. Even the poorest person in America is richer and has greater opportunities than many of the wealthier people in other countries. While there's no guarantee of wealth or happiness, this nation has provided the best environment for all its citizenry to elevate their socioeconomic status to whatever level they desire, not through government handouts, but through hard work and the pursuit of happiness. And the freedoms offered to all people, regardless of race or gender, exceed any in the history of the world, despite what our dissatisfied fellow citizens may indicate. In their ignorance, these dissatisfied citizens dream of a more just society. They will quickly realize that they themselves will incur the wrath of the heavy-handed central authorities just like every other citizen. By the time they realize the reality, it will be too late. They will be required to either join ranks or be removed. I love my country dearly, not simply because I've been able to capitalize on the freedoms offered here, but because I recognize the fact that it's the freest nation ever founded. Our nation admits and has admitted millions upon millions of immigrants. If it wasn't so great, why would so many people want to come here? Imagine what an ordeal we would be required to experience to relocate to another country. These immigrants are betting everything for the promises America can bring. All the immigrants being permitted to enter without going through the proper channels, hoping for the American dream, are being used as tools by the leaders of this proto-state. Their numbers will serve to usher in this regime. However, in the end, they too will experience the wrath of the state. All the groups that have been granted special privileges as a minority and promised a special position within the regime are being used as tools. They too will experience the wrath. Those who are permitted to terrorize our lawful citizens under the auspices of Antifa, BLM, and others will be neutralized and disbanded. When this regime comes into full swing, there shall be no other ideology than that of the state. I respect our founding fathers. Although they're being vilified presently, they were among the most grounded, intelligent, thoughtful, creative people this world has ever produced. As opposed to contemporary conservatives who are myopic in their approach to preserving our republic and her ideals, our founders were looking well into the future for the benefits we enjoy right now. The Republic's adversaries, our progressive socialist brothers, know exactly what their goals are to our detriment, and they're willing to march slow and steady to meet those goals. If we truly appreciate this great republic, then we need to take an active role in preserving its founding and the rule of law through education and applying the rules of law. I cherish our founding documents. I've been an advocate for them for over 40 years, encouraging my fellow citizens to understand what we are blessed with living under the U.S. Constitution. Although it's presently under attack by liberal socialist progressives, this document must be considered one of the best founding documents created to ground a people and steer a nation. Although our adversaries claim it's a slave document grounded in the 1700s, it's not. It's a living document that allows changes for a changing time. Every nation and every person will commit what historians will consider immoral or unfair deeds. As our founding document, the supreme law of the land, the U.S. Constitution allows for amendments in the attempt to prevent such abuses of power for the purposes of creating and maintaining a more perfect nation. I have spent countless hours talking to anyone who will listen regarding the blessing of our great republic, as well as the threats from those who desire to undermine her. Although I will continue to advocate for her, and I encourage you to do the same, as Christians, we cannot afford to allow it to consume us. We need to remember the message of the kingdom of heaven and what Jesus has indicated to us. In his message to us, Jesus repeatedly instructed us not to invest in this world, but the kingdom to come. He instructed us to love one another, including those who are trying to undermine our great nation, our forefathers, and our governing founding documents. They may be our political adversaries, but they continue to be children of God. During the time of Jesus' ministry, the political climate was hostile to Jesus and the new Christian foundlings. Jesus could have easily brought the wrath of heaven down on them if he chose to do so. Instead, he prayed to our Father to ensure this was his will, and we all know the decision our Father and Jesus made. On the evening of his capture and crucifixion, knowing full well what was about to occur, he instructed his disciples to love one another, now, here on earth. As Christians who appreciate our our great republic, we should continue to advocate for her by instructing others what benefits this nation brings to the world and what life would be like without her. We should also pray to our Father in heaven and ask for interventions that will lead this nation to a closer alignment with His will. And we should demonstrate honor and love for our God by doing His will here on earth. This is what He's looking for in us. Our God has blessed this nation for hundreds of years, and we have clearly gone astray. If we have any hope personally and nationally, we must attend to the will of God to demonstrate our worthiness with the hope of weathering the storm. I believe if we choose to love the love of God, one another, and attend to His will, then He'll intercede. If we don't, then He'll allow for our destruction. The precedent has already been established with His beloved Israel, in which He allowed her to be conquered and her people to be scattered over all the earth. This was allowed to happen because they failed to attend to the will of God. We mustn't allow the affairs of this world to consume us politically or otherwise. If it is the will of God that we lose this great nation, then so be it. In the end, this world, including this great nation, is not something we should be investing in, but the kingdom to come. This only occurs by focusing on our God, loving one another, and attending to His will. Some concluding thoughts that all Christians must understand. Our God desires us to love one another, including our enemies. He has commanded us to do so. However, the fever of discontent among constitutional loyalists is elevating, and there's reason to believe coalitions will be established to physically fight back. Before we do so, we all must reconcile the behaviors and commandments of our Lord. Arguments can surely be made to justify our desire to physically combat our political adversaries for the purposes of preserving and restoring this great republic. But we must consider the will of God first. Each one of us must reconcile the apparent discrepancy of loving one another on the one hand and physically attacking them, possibly to the point of death, on the other. If you can come up with a way these two can be reconciled, please let me know. And finally, if the republic falls into the hands of these extremist ideologues, then expect one of the prophecies of Jesus to be realized fully, that of persecution. As Christians, we're already experiencing persecution at some levels. If the regime comes into full swing, we will experience the full force of this persecution. However, we should already be prepared, because Jesus has warned us of what will occur in the message of the kingdom of heaven. He indicated we will be hated because of Him. When this occurs, and it will, and I believe it will, we need to be prepared in all ways, spiritually, mindfully, and physically. This will be the ultimate test of our faith, because we will probably be required to denounce our faith publicly. And regardless of whether we remain true to our God or not, we probably won't survive the ordeal. What we know of the message of the kingdom of heaven is this. Although Jesus could have easily destroyed His adversaries with the wave of a hand, He chose to love those who persecute Him and relinquished His life. I believe Jesus has already indicated what we should do in such chaos. The path to the kingdom of heaven is not to invest in this world, but the kingdom to come. Although the anguish we are likely to experience under such a regime may seem unbearable and persistent, it will be the wink of an eye compared to the time we'll be experiencing the glory of the kingdom of heaven. However, we may have to persevere some through this difficult times before we get there. This is the message of the kingdom of heaven.